Thank you for joining I Am Possible, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Sanjay Bhargava, who has been on the founding team of PayPal. He was also part of Citibank and recently held the post of the country director and chairman of the board of Starlink, a company founded by Elon Musk to sort out the internet problem at scale. So, Sanjay, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Why don't we start with a brief introduction and background?
Thank you, Eddie, first for having me on the podcast. Very briefly, I grew up in India, and like I was 32 when I left India, and I went first to Thailand and then to the US, and this was all with Citibank. Initially, before Citibank, I was with Tata Administrative Service. I studied in IIT Mumbai and IIM Ahmedabad, and grew up in the four metros. Then in 2004, because PayPal did fairly well, so I could live anywhere, and my parents were aging. So I decided to come back to India and see, how in some ways I could give back to India and also be with my parents. So far, and I've been in India since 2004. So it's quite a long time. I've been here for about 18 years, primarily in Delhi, but now I've moved to Mumbai. And one of the reasons for my moving from Delhi to Mumbai was the pollution, which is pretty bad in Delhi at certain times of the year. In Mumbai, it's a little better, not all that great, but still. So anyway, but there are lots of things to like about India and some things which are not so good. So
Yeah.
I think, but collectively, if we all work together, we can try and make what's not so good better. And maybe at some point, India will take its rightful place in the world.
We living in an interesting time, and India, which was a third world country, now is economically really powerful and in a strategic space to kind of leverage all the opportunity that technology presents. So it's an exciting space. But yes, you mentioned, there's this good and bad. The bad is the pollution, which I believe around 35 out of the 50 most polluted cities happens to be in India. And I hope and I wish that we do something about that. Delhi is a huge problem, so is Bombay, and I'm based out of Bombay, and I'm also working on moving to Goa to, because my son happens to be 6 7 years old and he visas because of the pollution problem. So yes, I guess there is so much opportunity here, and I believe that if we kind of come together, we can sort the problems and really make India future ready. So you were part of Starlink for a very short time and you resigned also very quickly. Could you share your journey about being part of Starlink India and its vision and what led you to resign?
Elon Musk asked me if I would take on this opportunity, and I knew Elon from my time at PayPal. And they were evaluating coming into India. And I was quite excited when he talked to me about, the potential for something like Starlink to help rural development in India. I felt that, being with Starlink would give me the opportunity to get back into the thick of things, which I was a little concerned about, given the fact that I'd been out of corporate for a long time. And I also felt that, because the potential of Starlink to help was a lot, right? And Starlink would be bringing in the investment, right? So there was nothing very negative for India. And the space was so vast in broadband, and it wasn't as if Starlink was looking to dominate. So I tried to get the Indian government and the other players in broadband to kind of understand that, but I was kind of making relatively little headway, and I then felt that it would be, I have no doubt that at some point in time, Starlink will be in India because the fit is too good, it will happen. But it was going to be a very slow process, and it didn't fit in with my goals, like where it was constraining me, because when you're with a corporate, you have to be mindful of what you say and all that kind of stuff. You're not a free agent. And I felt it might um, uh, sort of impede my kind of retired life and what I wanted to do, type of thing. So I felt that the fit wasn't very good and it would be very, very slow. And by nature, I'm a very impatient person, which is not a great quality, especially in India, but that's the way I am, because I like disruptive innovation. So when things happen, I don't like incremental innovation. So with all that, it was more very much a personal thing to kind of say that, look, I don't think the fit is very good. So can I sort of step down? And Elon was gracious enough to allow me to do that. So that's what I did.
Satellite broadband, I mean, it's got so much potential. Today I think the biggest divide happens to be in the education healthcare space, which I believe should be for everyone, the same thing. But there's large inequality over there. If you're sitting in a city, or the privileged few kind of gets the quality healthcare or the education. With satellite broadband, you could bring the same kind of education or healthcare for anyone anywhere. So yes, the opportunity and the potential of it creating huge societal transformation was humongous. Could you elaborate or unpack on the slow process? What do you mean by that? Was there like a lot of barriers when you faced when you was trying to?
So I think the fundamental problem is that, like, there's a perception that India cannot pay for broadband, and Starlink is expensive. Now, so there's no way a rural household is going to be able to pay this price, right? But if you think innovatively and you think very differently, and you mentioned the benefits of broadband, whether it is in telemedicine, whether it's in education, whether it is in GDP creation, right? A lot of people miss the GDP creation part of it. Because if I'm a small business person, like I'm doing some ecotourism or something, now if I have broadband and I have energy and I have water and some way people can get to my ecotourism place, whether by road or by air or whatever. So you have, let's say all those are possible. Then a fair number of people won't come to my property if I don't have broadband. Because like if I want to work from there, I want to spend say 15 days in a clean environment. I want to, enjoy sort of rural India, for whatever it offers. But I also need to be connected to the world. Like a lot of people. So if I had this, then could I have more rooms? Could I increase my room rate? And would that 1,50,000 that I pay I could actually make 5 lakhs a year? Now that's a straightforward business proposition for many things. So what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way, and a lot of this is covered in the white papers, so I won't take more time on this, but the thing is that if you look at the demand side, not the supply side. So a lot of people say, oh, you should cut the AGR, you should give this incentive, you should give that incentive, etc. Right? But what if you change the lens totally? Right? You said that there are 7 million points in rural India which need broadband. Each of them, on the average, will be able to pay $1,000 because, like, about 30% or 2.1 million points are with the government, like schools, police stations, hospitals, etc. Okay, now there is something called the Universal Services Obligation Fund. So 5% of all the telecom fees that you and me have paid over the years go into this USOF fund. Mm-hmm. It's not very clear what the size of this fund is, and it's not very transparent because it goes into the Consolidated Fund of India. But suffice it to say, if you just do a back of the envelope, say 5%, that's a lot of money, right? Now, instead of giving, say, incentives or to people who would put up towers or 5G sites or whatever, If you said that I'm going to give vouchers or demand vouchers to stimulate demand so that these places can pay, right, using the universal, so that's not then going to create a burden on the state budgets. And then I've been talking to states also, and the amount that they would have to pay is a very, very small fraction of the budget, right? So if you wanted every single school in India to have good quality broadband, okay, by say the end of 2023, and 2022 is a bit too soon, but by end of 2023, if you wanted that, that's entirely possible. Okay, except you got to change the mindset. Now, in the case of Starlink, we could have reached many schools which are very remote and would not necessarily be easily reached by fiber and 5G. Okay. So, in all these cases, if you said that, look, we welcome foreign investment and we welcome domestic investment. Okay, because there's a national digital communication policy, which I've referenced in my white paper, which was signed in 2018 by the cabinet, and it was approved by the cabinet. Now, that said that we'll have every single citizen by 2022, and we are in 2022 with broadband, okay, 50 megabits, okay, which is kind of crazy. We are nowhere close to that.
Right.
But it also said that we will attract $100 billion of foreign direct investment. Okay. Now, we have so far attracted only 7.5 billion. Okay. So, where is 7.5? Where is 100? Now, the interesting thing is that when I came in representing Starlink, you would think that, okay, I'm bringing investment in, you have a target of getting 100 billion. You've only done 7.5. So you should be really welcoming me, saying, how can I get you to invest more? But that was not the case, right? Everything was very slow in terms of the approval process, etc., etc. Because satellite is something new, so we don't have a SATCOM policy, etc. So there are some very good reasons as to why it was slow in the traditional way of thinking. But in the new way of thinking, saying, hey, society is going to benefit a lot. So why don't I give the companies like Starlink, and I'm saying whether they are 5G companies or broadband companies or whatever companies, any company, a license to come and do a limited rollout. Say, okay, you can do up to 1,000 points, because for say Starlink, we have to set up gateway sites, test our technology in India. It's not just plug and play. You have to position the satellites, do lots of things. So while the unlimited commercial rollout license is being processed, let us move, right? So that is what doesn't happen. So what I'm trying to say is that there are many instances in India, this is just one of them, where there is a structural problem in the way we think. This is the thing that we have to think about in India. See, where are there structural problems which we need to change?
My podcast is called I Am Possible. The reason I chose the name, because I believe we live in a world where anything and everything is possible. The only thing that limits you is your mindset. We've got so much opportunity in a country today, 1.3 billion people. We are exporting, I think, almost all the best minds, not exporting, we're pushing them to kind of move abroad, is because of the lack of opportunities or the lack of belief in honing and nurturing those great minds to kind of build companies which can be, $1 billion businesses out of India. So I think, yes, there is a structural mindset problem which needs to be changed, because you said that we were looking at $100 billion investment coming in India, and somehow we have touched only around 7 billion. There's companies such as Starlink and others, and Tesla also has been trying to kind of launch over here in India, has been facing some problem. I hope that we kind of relook at what the problem is. I do believe that we are a nation where cost comes like on the top of the agenda. But I think it's also like an incremental versus exponential thinking that maybe anyway this is maybe a little expensive, but over the time, the the cost versus benefit is going to be really beneficial for the nation. So I hope that there are more minds coming into the government or policymakers, and figure a way to catapult India, because we are in a great position to reap the benefits of what's coming in. You are a proponent of exponential tech, and if you've been at the forefront of some of the top companies, PayPal, Starlink, and many others, what are your views on exponential tech per se, from incremental thinking to exponential tech, and what do you think is going to be the societal benefits of us looking in that direction and leveraging exponential tech?
That's a great question. So let me try and answer that. So, 20 years ago, when PayPal started, or Google started, or eBay started, or Amazon started, these were all very, very small companies. Okay, and you remember these names because these names succeeded. There were about 10,000 other companies, I think at least, okay, which started, and many of them failed. Okay, but that's the nature of things. But there was a whole mad rush, right? It was the Silicon Valley boom time, right? And what was that triggered by? It was triggered by the internet. And I think we have the benefit of hindsight that it did change a lot. Now, if we look at today, I think that the next 20 years are kind of similar to the prior 20 years. That here again, you have a discontinuity. Then, there are the other frontier sort of tech, right? Like you could call them quantum computing, you could call them, metaverse or whatever it is, right? So those are things which are there. Some people would say they're already there and, they're big. Some people may say they're still to be proven. But the thing is that now, someone was telling me that the largest number of programmers in quantum computing are from India, right? Because IBM has this thing where they've got this thing where you can sign up to be a quantum computing programmer or whatever. And the largest number of people who have taken advantage of that, and well, they may not have built anything tangible, but at least they're getting exposed to this thing, are from India, right? So what I'm saying is that there are many, many new technologies, and technology is like a genie. You can't put it back in the bottle, right? Once it's out, it's out. Right? But the next 20 years, according to me, are going to be huge, right? And I see trillion-dollar companies, trillion-dollar market cap companies emerging, which you have not heard of today. Just like PayPal and all those kind of things, and they are like $100 billion or whatever. But I think in 20 years, you will have some companies which solve some very deep problems. So my hypothesis is that you are going to see a lot of companies, not a lot, maybe 20, 50, something like that, who are going to be trillion-dollar companies because they're solving various problems, say in finance, in agriculture, in energy, in transportation, what have you, decarbonization, etc., etc. And if you look at the previous 20 years, most of these companies that I named came out of Silicon Valley or, USA, in that. I don't think that will be true in the next 20 years. There will be some companies which come out of China, some companies which come out of Israel, maybe some out of Europe, some out of the US, because the US is not going anywhere. It is still very powerful and it will produce some of these companies. And maybe, I hope, some from India, right? So one of the things that I'm trying to work on and try to get people to understand in India is that, there's a missing link. Like you have to create an enabling ecosystem for these companies to emerge out of India. Because just purely based on statistics, nothing else, right? There have to be high quality entrepreneurs, the next Elon Musk, the next Sergey Brin, the next Larry Page. There have to be people like that in India. They have to be. It's not, I mean, just purely based on statistics. There's so many people, So even if there's a random distribution or whatever you want, right? They have. But the problem is that those people don't have a enabling ecosystem, so they die.
Can you give some concrete examples on what can India do to emulate what Silicon Valley and China has been doing?
So let's see that suppose India wanted to be enabling. Okay, what does it need to do? Right? So one of the things that I'm saying is that, look, can one state in India, which has a forward-looking chief minister, right? Prime minister is all good, but the action on the ground really happens in the states, right? The prime minister can be a visionary, can guide, etc., but he does not control anything, right? Like in terms of actual stuff which happens. Okay, so since you're moving to Goa, right? Let's say whoever gets elected in Goa in the elections, okay, let's say that person is a visionary and really good. Okay. And they say that we are going to take Goa and transform it to grow the GDP of Goa 10x. Take one state and set some really ambitious goals. No poverty. I mean, I'll meet all the SDGs. I'll have jobs for everybody. And I will have 10x GDP. So now, if you take one district of Goa, like, because this is an experiment, right? You don't want to take the whole state and you have business as usual going on and on. You take one district and say, okay, I'm going to take this district and this is going to be my lab, right? Where I'm going to this thing, and I'm going to invite world-class companies to come and solve problems in this lab. How can I grow tourism in this district? Massive. Maybe tourism is not the only thing. Maybe there's agriculture. Maybe there's industry that can come in and do stuff. So what is the development plan for this district? Now, the other interesting part is that in India, there is this big fallacy because of the socialist kind of thinking that the government has to invest, or that there are certain things that only the government can do. Right? That mindset needs to change, to say that how do I attract the best companies in the world, whether they're domestic or foreign, to come and invest and solve my problem. And I don't tell them how to solve it, because that is their expertise. Like, let's take a mundane problem like, saying, how do I get pipe water into every single home in my small country, which is this district, right? Now, see, the bureaucrats in the state, various consultants like Accenture, KPMG, McKinsey, Bain, whatever, they are not experts in actually figuring out innovative solutions. But there are many companies which are commercial companies which actually have solved problems in very many places. And if you tell them that, look, you just give me a proposal. You have to be at least 100 crore company, or you have to create a new use my thing as a lab. I will not put in any money. In fact, you have to give me 1% of your equity because I'm enabling you. But I will get you critical mass. I'll make sure that every household, essentially whatever solution you have, will start using it, right? But you also have to give me a performance guarantee that you will deliver, right? And maybe I won't give you only a license. Maybe I'll give it to 2 people, maybe 3, maybe not more than 3. But, I'll do this. So I'll take one district of Goa here, another district here, another district here, maybe give them to separate companies or whatever, right? So this way, a lot of problems, let's call them societal problems, okay, will get solved, okay, and the government will not put in any money. They will make money. So this is what governments don't understand, right? Look, and I'm not talking, something which hasn't happened before.
Exactly.
You take telecom in India, the government has made so much money. Have they put the infrastructure for towers and everything? No. right? So the private companies are put down. So this to me is the central problem that we have to think of. And what we are trying to do, I'm trying to work with one company in Mumbai, which is trying to create a platform called GPL, which is the Global Poverty Eradication Lab. And this one is going to actually have two or three areas. So one is going to have an area of research, where it does its own research, but it also invites researchers from all around the world who want their research to be translated into action. And then you can also elect good leaders, leaders who deliver what we call metros, which are measurable, time-bound, real outcomes. Because otherwise, in India, what happens is that very good meaning leaders, like say there was the ex-Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who basically said, I will make Mumbai like Shanghai. Now, both you and me, I don't know if you visited Shanghai, but I have. Okay. And this is nowhere near Shanghai. Right? It is nowhere close. Okay. So there's not a problem of vision, there's a problem of execution. Right? I told you like the National Digital Communication Policy, which was in the Modi government, right? So it's not that I'm absolutely apolitical. I'm actually a US citizen, so I don't have a vote. So nothing in this thing is in any way political, okay, or thing. So what I'm saying is that the National Digital Communication Policy was not implemented. This policy is not. So every time this becomes a problem, because even if you have a policy which is issued by the government, you as an entrepreneur don't know what to believe.
Right.
Right? Is this going to happen or not happen? Because I'm going to sink in billions of dollars trying to say that this thing is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then where am I?
So you mentioned the framework that needs to be done to build an enabling ecosystem. Are there any companies that has been doing something similar on this line?
So there's something called Village Global VC in Silicon Valley, where if you are trying to build something, so this is like a Y Combinator for startups which have a global vision and which want to do impact, right? So you can apply to that, and if you get accepted, you have to give 7% of your equity for $150,000. Okay, and you can interact with other startups. They have some kind of resource thing, so that it changes your mindset. So it could be very useful. Those. So now also the thing is that people like Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Reid Hoffman, etc., are all associated with this. So you can use them as sounding boards. But now what we're saying is, why don't we create a Village Global VC in India? Right? So people like me and my wife, we could be thought leaders. Right? So that's one layer. Then there's another layer of mentors. Right? So these are people who in India have actually built companies, or they've built global companies, and they're younger, and they want to be mentors, and they want to put in that 7% into these companies. Take 7% and give them a crore, right? In them. So now, if you apply to this thing, then if you've not built a prototype, you haven't bootstrapped, you will be rejected. And then if one of these districts has a lab, license you, right? But they have a condition that you have to raise 100 crores, say within 90 days. Okay, if you have a license from a district, it's so easy to raise the 100 crores, right? So this is the way. And then if you say, okay, one district first, then maybe a state, then maybe pan-India, then maybe the globe, right? Those are the kind of visionary thinkers that we want to try and attract. So this is a missing link in India.
Right.
That there is no place, like I was telling you, that statistically there have to be these brilliant minds. Okay. Now the whole thing is that we are hoping that we'll give these brilliant minds a hope, to at least go to some place. And obviously it's a very tough problem. Many who try, many will fail, but you could get many outcomes in between. From total failure, meaning your money went to zero, or somewhere in between. or you actually have a $1 trillion market cap company,
Right, right.
right?
India has the largest numbers of engineers and developers. What we lack is an enabling ecosystem. And if we put that together, there's nothing stopping us from being a $1 trillion economy or building $1 trillion businesses. You have been mentioning that you've been building Global Poverty Elimination Lab. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
So if you look, there is JPAL. Okay, that's the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab in MIT, which was set up 2002, etc., 2003, right? And Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo won a Nobel Prize. But see, the focus of that is different. They are research, and they are trying to say that unless you do very good research, you can't, do stuff. And that's fine. But what we want is that this lab that we are talking about is a for-profit entity. It is not donor fund. Because we are saying poverty eradication is not a altruistic goal. We're not doing this because of the goodness of our heart, right? We are doing this because it's a great business opportunity. Okay, that's a big difference. Okay. The second, so what would the revenue streams of this be? And it probably needs a certain amount of capital to get it started. But the thing is that, let's say you have, but if there are 100 million people who join, and let's say you charge $1 a year, okay, for premium membership, right? Like, now what exactly you get with premium membership will need to be defined. But like, it's $1 a year, okay? Now that is $100 million in revenue for this lab, right? So that is one revenue stream. Then a second revenue stream is going to be the thing of doing consulting assignments for a state, right? So let's say this lab goes to Goa. Tells the chief minister that, look, you have this vision, you have a full bureaucracy which is supposed to help you achieve that vision. But just like any other company, even in the private sector, at times you want a consultant, to act as a bridge in the middle, to talk to these world-class companies, to attract them, to do various things. So we will give you a proposal as a consultant. But the big thing is that these 7% kind of thing which the mentors put, 1% they will give to GPL. Okay, so GPL puts in no money, but it gets this 1% because it's trying to get all these people, find them, connect them, and there'll be some staffers there. But if one of your companies, and let's say you had 1% and it got diluted, let's say 10 times. So now you have 1.1% before it became a $1 trillion company. But 0.1% of a trillion, okay, is $1 billion, right? So the whole thing is that there are many revenue streams for this GPL. So, in fact, some of these people will probably look out for a CEO for GPL, and then the question is, how do you, so the portfolio companies might give a certain percentage to the staffers of the lab, just like you have a VC fund, where, so say maybe 0.25% of the company, they can get at the same rates as the mentors. They'll have to invest. So they also have some skin in the game, and they could, if the portfolio companies does really well, they can make out like bandits in that. And maybe even the bureaucrats and the politicians and, some 1% of this company's equity at the start could be a private placement among a certain set of bureaucrats and politicians, so that they don't have to be corrupt. They can actually, legitimately invest money, take risk. And if these companies become big, they can benefit handsomely, right? So anyway, these, like many things, are just concepts. I don't know whether they'll work or not. But it's fun trying.
Yes, there is so many problems, and each of these problems are billion-dollar opportunities. If we look at it in a systemic way, there is so much that can be done to create India where innovation is first and collaboration. Uh, my last question to you: any words of advice to my listeners, to entrepreneurs, startups, and maybe, you know, elaborate on, you know, your beginning line. You said ending poverty, not just the material wealth, but mind and body. I think these are really, really important things, you know. Is it just too way out, or can we get to a world where we can actually, you know, end not just material poverty but also the mind and body? Because I guess there's a that we are all just rushing to nowhere in this quest of creating innovation or profit, but I think somehow we missing out human wellness. Would you like to address that?
My advice to the entrepreneurs is that, look, it's like, if you think you are like Yuvraj Singh of the entrepreneurs, you can hit 6 sixes in one over, right? Then attempt to build $1 trillion company. Okay. But if you're like Rahul Dravid, taking a single of every ball and all that, that's great. You can still be a great entrepreneur, but don't try and do $1 trillion companies. Okay. These are very difficult, very hard. You have to be the right kind of person to do it, and patient and solve a very difficult problem. You got to enjoy that, and you have to build a team. You have to attract the capital, but it can be done. Okay, and that's, I do believe that there are a few Yuvrajas in India. Okay, so that is my thing. Also, don't get too caught up in being an entrepreneur, right? Like, for instance, I am not an entrepreneur, right? I have worked for PayPal, okay, and because I was an early employee at PayPal, part of the founding team, I did very well. Okay, made more money than many entrepreneurs who are founders, right? So you don't have to be a founder. Now, coming to this other part, I'm still in my very early things of thinking this through, but I tend to believe that the world needs a new social contract, right? So, like you had communism, you had socialism, you had libertarianism, you have capitalism, and many isms. But I think we need a new ism. Now, what exactly that is, I don't know, but I'm trying to think about it in terms of this. But in my view, that ism has to be based on choice, right? And people have to be happy. So it's not only the Elon Musks of the world who do philanthropy. All of us do, who are above a certain level. So, like, let's say if you have above $1 million, then whatever excess you have, 1% of that you contribute, right? Again, I haven't done the math. This may be too far-fetched. I don't know, whatever it is. Can some innovative thinking and disruptive thinking be used to figure out stuff like this, right? So the basic thing being that I have so many friends who are very, very well, okay? And I am also quite well. But the thing is that there's not necessarily a correlation between being happy and well, right? So I'm trying my best to be contented and think about all these other things and all that. And so that makes me happy as well as well-being. But even when I think about this war in Ukraine and I look at the deprivation in the slums and all those things, those doesn't make me happy, right? So one of my motivations in trying to make the world better is my own happiness. Like, I want to live in a happy world, where everybody is happy. Nobody is saying, okay, you guys, you sucked the blood of the world, you exploited us, now you're rich, and now that's why you're talking like this, and all this kind of stuff. Declaration of Independence or whatever in the US, it says it's self-evident that all men are created equal. So basically what I'm saying is that I think this is not correct, that people are different. and we have to celebrate their differences and not do some forced equality thing about it. Like, so communism or socialism and all, they frown upon ultra rich people, right? And they want to reduce the gap. And then this is a structural problem, right? Because like if I'm wealthy and I invest well, then my wealth is going to grow. Yeah. The poor guy is not investing well, right? So his wealth is not going to grow. So the gap is going to increase, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, right? So I think we have all kinds of wrong thinking, in terms of all this kind of stuff, and just trying to create noise as to, while we're not looking at structural solutions to these problems. I'm not saying what I said here or I've written and all is correct, okay? But it could be a useful starting point. And I'm very happy if someone improves upon it and uses it, right? So I'm not trying to make a claim that what I'm saying is like really good, okay? Or I think it's interesting, but it's not necessarily. The other thing I'm saying is that, especially now, I would not have said this if I was 20, that now there are much better people than me, and probably they are much younger than me, who implement this stuff because they have grown up with the latest technology. I can try and understand them, like the Bitcoin and metaverse and like NFT and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of get lost because I haven't grown up with this stuff. But some other people have, right? So they are much better. So that's what I mean, because otherwise, the C-rollers can sound like what they call a humble brag kind of thing. No, but it's not. I really believe that I am not the best person to implement, even if my ideas are correct at this point in time. And the Karma Yogi part is that I feel I've just got to do my karma. That is, I talk, I write, I interact, whatever it is, without worrying about whether this will result in anything concrete or not. Of course, I will try and nudge it to have concrete outcomes, but I don't get frustrated, because earlier I used to get frustrated, because I said, why can't people see it the way I see it? But now, I don't get frustrated. I said, okay, yeah, maybe they're correct. Maybe I'm wrong.
Right. Thank you, Sanjay. Really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast, sharing your insights. We're living in a fantastic world. Whatever insights you shared, right from the growth of technology, yes, there is some insane things happening. The metaverse, the virtual world that we're talking about is finally being laid, Web 3.0, where we're going to break away from the 2D medium and enter the digital medium. The opportunity it will bring for everyone. Finally, maybe we might have a world where we could have a standardization of healthcare and education. You mentioned about global poverty elimination, and I guess we need more minds such as yourself to look out at those far out moonshots, because yes, it's possible. Yes, there are so many problems with the current world, the inequality, the deep divide. And can we have a world which is full of happy people rather than people who are just wanting to be Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk? Can we create a world where we have individuals who are happy, creating happy world and creating deeper impact? And I guess all that is possible, and there are minds such as yourself trying to work on a framework. There's universal basic income, there is blockchain which is going to be creating decentralization, and all of these new technologies. I think we, rather than being over awed or scared about it, I think we need to leverage that. And if we leverage it and be lifelong learners, I think or route or path will be to glorious. So thank you once again, Sanjay, for taking time and being part of the podcast. Wish you the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you, Sanjay. Really appreciate this.
Thanks, Eddie.